The Great Feminization: How Social Engineering Rewired Our Institutions. Helen Andrews wrote an essay that argues what we call wokeness isn't new ideology at all, but the result of a deeper social shift. The great feminization of our institutions. From law to journalism, medicine to academia, women now make up the majority in many of society's most powerful fields. This didn't happen by nature. It was planned through decades of government and corporate policy that rewarded gender balance over merit. Law schools became majority female in 2016, medical schools in 2019, and newsrooms like the New York Times shortly after. Each milestone coincided with the spread of wokeness across the West. Andrews argues that anti-discrimination laws and HR mandates made it impossible for women to lose. The result is a culture that values empathy over excellence and consensus over truth. The goal was equality. The outcome is fragility, a system that confuses compassion with competence. So have empathy and inclusivity quietly replaced logic and skill as the new virtues.
It seems that way, right? It seems like we live in a place where, to our previous conversation, logic really doesn't rule the day anymore. And we live in a world where DEI seems to have taken over merit, right? It's where do you fit sort of in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? How many victim points do you have? And what's interesting is I don't even know who we are, but we allow this group to sort of build this framework of DEI and who's more important and who's not. And it's interesting because it's like they control enough of the cultural zeitgeist to just kind of drop in their ideas, and then they just take a foothold. I don't know how they do it, but it's how it works. So there's all these things that you kind of stack points, and then from that point forward, it's like those are the people that are prioritized without any real merit. This is very, very clear. And don't get me wrong, I think that there's a problem with equality of opportunity in the world, not outcome. That's an impossibility. That's what they're striving for, is equality of outcome, which just you can't have. I'm 5'7". I can't play in the NBA. I'm also 40 years old. There's just no chance. It's too late. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And I'm okay with that. That's life. I have other skills. I got other talents. I'm good at other things. But in trying to balance those scales, that's kind of what they've tried to do with society. And it's kind of a lose-lose, right? Because you end up getting into this place where society's less efficient. Again, if it's not a meritocracy, you're not getting the best results in any particular arena whatsoever. But you also have a lot of resentment that builds in society. I think that, again, we could have improved our equality of opportunity for sure. I think that's going to always be a challenge no matter what. But society was in a much better place in like the late 90s and early 2000s with respect to a lot of this stuff, with racism, with homophobia, with a lot of these things. We were pretty well balanced. But you implement these tools and you actually create the opposite effect. Now you're seeing people that have resentment. So you're actually creating more racist issues. You're creating more issues with anybody that's kind of on the DEI scale, and they're getting all these things and not operating as well for the people that probably deserve them more, right? So you're actually dividing society in a very, very significant way. So yes, that's kind of what's happening, and unfortunately, it's all pretty negative.
Well, it's crazy to think, what did they think was going to happen? Again, I believe a lot of these people are completely delusional, but you start dividing society up into subgroups and then saying certain subgroups get these opportunities because of whatever historical injustice you can come up with. And we're going to take taxes, like even in our tax reports, they track how much they close. They call it the tax gap. Like, how much can we close the income between, say, Aboriginal people and white people, or marginalized or racial groups towards white people as well. And so it's like, what did you think was going to happen when you started doing this? Of course, everything was going to start becoming more conflict.
Yes.
I always try to just bring things down to a individual level, because that's where things start to make a lot more sense. And if it can scale across different levels of society, then it's probably pretty true. And it's like, imagine if you've got a couple kids in the house and you're constantly taking things from two kids and giving it to the one, and you go, yeah, of course those two kids are going to grow to have resentment for that one kid.
Yes.
And that one kid's going to start acting like a spoiled little brat.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happened across society. But to your point about how things have become less efficient as well, I actually thought this was really interesting in this essay. I do highly recommend people go read the whole essay, because it is fantastic. It's called The Great Feminization by Helen Andrews. But one point she made about in there too is the difference between masculine and feminine psychology when it comes to completing tasks. So male tend to go, how do we complete the task? And that becomes the marker for success, is whether the task gets completed and how well it does. A female ethos worries about having everybody involved in the task, making sure, hey, does everybody have a equal say here in what's going on and how we approach this task and how it gets done, and what are we working towards? And then you get to this
bureaucratic,
right? And you get to this point where, or at least the DEI bureaucracy for sure, but this is where you get to this point where you're just constantly worrying about representation within these institutions, but not whether these institutions are actually fulfilling their roles.
Right.
And so we're definitely seeing that on a large scale. And again, this is nothing to do with individuals, but group behavior is very real. And when it comes to a feminine ethos as well, actually, even going back to the friend enemy distinction as well, and why I think this has become so large, is because men typically go, okay, there can be a predator out there, but I'm willing to work. Like, for instance, if I do a business deal with somebody, I might understand that this person is a snake, but I'm willing to cooperate on our mutually aligned incentives. And then I'm going to keep an eye out, and also have in the back of my head that if things go too far, we'll go into conflict. And there's the kind of that underlying idea beneath all male dynamics is, hey, you push far enough, like, we're fighting.
Yeah.
When it comes to the female ethos, there's no ability to cooperate with somebody that you might not be actually completely aligned with. Even if you look at this all across the animal kingdom, I'm not even saying this is just a human thing as well. You look at it, you go, okay, in a feminine ethos, there's mom, pups, people to be taken care of, and then predators. That's it. Those are the only distinctions. And you see this, you go, okay, we've got the moms, the woke crowd that want to take care of these people that they assume need their help, whether all these marginalized communities and groups, and then there's predators to those groups.
Yes. That's
their entire worldview. And so it is just friends and enemies. And so I think that's why that largely took off as well, is because, again, this isn't anything to do with any individual women or women themselves. It's more about feminine in the psychology, because I mean, hell, there's women that are more masculine than some men, and men that 100%. Are more feminine than some women. So it's like, it's not, this isn't a cut and dry thing. But when it comes to those values and that psychology, that's definitely a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing that I would add, and kind of going back to an earlier conversation as well, is when you get people to operate within this space, what happens is, again, people become over-identified with these different components of society and where they fit in, and over-identified with these things that put them in categories. And then what they do with those is they make that who they are, right? So I think it's dangerous to over-identify with anything. Even if you're a doctor and you consider that to be the most important thing, well, you're limiting your capacity to have more or be more. You shouldn't over-identify with anything that defines you, essentially. So that's actually like a rule that I made for myself a long time ago. I think that's a very important thing. But in society, if they keep doing this, well, now you listen to some, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but you listen to some liberal on a social channel, and it's some video, and they give you the list of what they are. I'm like there's 12 different things, and you're like, okay, like, I don't even know what to call this person. They've got all these mental issues that they want to express to everybody, and they're all covered in blue hair and all these piercings and whatever. Okay, cool. But you see, when you do that to yourself, how do you ever shake free from those shackles? The answer is you really can't. You're so emotionally connected and emotionally tied into this stuff that you're willing to defend it to the death because it's your entire identity. And that's what I'm saying here is when you create these categories and you do this within society, you create an army of people that are over-identified with all these really these micro categories that you've put them in. That's how they define themselves. Then there goes logic back into emotion. They'll fight it to the death, friend-enemy situation all over again.
Yeah, once people get subsumed by collective identities, whether that's race, whether that's gender, whether it's whatever, once you get subsumed by that, you do stop being an individual in a large sense, because now you are just actually essentially a reflection of this collective identity. And now there's a lot of people throughout history, like say Herbert Marcuse, who is a Marxist theorist, that would say that we're all just that. But I do think you can actually cultivate a sense of individuality within those collective identities that try to get thrusted upon you, but you can resist that in a very big way. Actually, even just to the identity conversation in general, it's very interesting to think about. Like, many people think, okay, well, I identify as, like, I'm going to claim who I am and then I'm going to enforce it on the world.
Yes.
And like the word identity itself stems from two Latin words, identitum and essentias, which is repeated and being. So like your identity is literally just who you act out on a repeated basis.
Yes.
And so it's just don't over-identify with, oh, I'm this title or I'm this race or anything. It's just like you are the culmination of all of your actions. But people don't want that one because that's a lot harder to do. That's a lot harder to build than be able to just say, I am this.
Yes, it's your actions or more.
Yeah.